Hi, this is Steven Lewis Simpson here. Thank you very much for watching the film. And in this commentary here, I hope to fill you in with a lot of more details in terms of the choices made and why we did what we did in the film. I want to start right off on this. These images that are coming up right now were actually one of the very last ideas I had on the film. I really liked the idea of binding in the landscape through the history for the people here. And so, here as we dissolve into Dan's house, I wanted to get that sense over to the audience that his people have been there for such a long period of time. That sense of this, being embedded with this land. And this shot was something that I'd thought of very early on in the adaptation, just sort of setting the scene. The film is to have a very particular pace. It's very important for me that it's the pace that you feel while out there, not so much the pace that people normally want to make movies, which nowadays is very fast and loose. And I wanted to make something very measured and thoughtful and sort of more within the pace of Dan, the key character, and taking it in through such a just a kind of private moment of going to Lou and in the setting with the outhouse, and the mystery of the daughter here. This is Roseanne Supernault, who was the first person in the entire cast that I auditioned. I auditioned her 3 years before we started filming, and I auditioned her in Canada for the two roles that she played, and she was excellent in both. And I'll tell you later on about the decision I made there. Actually, this kid who's playing the son here is a friend of mine's son, Colton, and he just sort of has such a natural way about him that he fit really well in this role. What we really wanted to do here was just create a contrast between the two worlds, and but by not doing it in any kind of key contrived sort of movie form, just everything just quite natural as this call comes in and sets up the narrative. And this is sort of one of the things when you're adapting a novel into a movie, you sort of have to decide what to keep, how to structure things differently. And invariably, the opening is one of the key elements that changes because you have to set up the characters. And, often the initial setup is what can often be different because, in a film like this, we cannot rely on the first person narrative that a novel has. And the novel really brings you into that character's monologue. So, we have to experience everything while watching it through the character, which creates a different emphasis. In a sense, you have to create a bit more backstory around the characters for that. So, placing, Kent in the position of his home life, we also start to explore a bit more in terms of his sense of loss, having just lost his father, and sort of the mystery call coming in at a kind of crucial point in his life, and him trying to put place and meaning into himself, what he's doing. And one of the things in the novel that Kent informed me of was that sometimes some people criticize the character of the Nurburn character as being perhaps a bit indulgent by taking this journey, and in the novel he was gone for quite a bit of a longer period of time. And so to sort of address that, I mean, it's kind of a gift when you get the feedback that the novel had, and there's a few things that you might be able to fix in the different form. And so here in this situation, we have his wife taking the son on a trip to visit her sister, who's just away to give birth, and basically Nurburn is left behind with his sort of raw emotions, having lost his father, and that sort of then places him more extremely in this point of wanting to step on this journey and head out there, and sort of also dealing with the question that happens a little bit of people asking, what was the impetus of him going out there, or whether in the novel it was a little too automatic. And one of the things you sort of challenge, what's a challenge really as a filmmaker, is, often how to visually tell a story. So, you're not just having the characters tell you what they feel, which is really sort of cumbersome storytelling. And, in this film, I wanted things to unfold in their own terms. And so, the conundrum was how to, introduce us into Kent's world, his relationship with his father, who's no longer around, without setting up forced scenes to deliver that information. And so, I constructed this exploration of a life through a box of memories, as quite a concise way of doing it. And most of the things in the box actually belong to Kent Nurburn and were his father's. So, I imagine when he watches this film, it's a very poignant scene for him. And, we wanted to, whenever possible, to embed the reality into the film. And there's a few key elements within it, props. I mean, that's the real To Walk the Red Road book that Kent Nurburn wrote in real life with the kids on Red Lake Reservation. Later there's a key prop, which is this eagle amulet, and that Dan ends up giving him at the end of the film, and that's the real amulet in the film that Kent Nurburn was given by the character that he based the lead character of Dan on in the novel. And again, here we go into another sequence, which is just a simple juxtaposition of, Kent's ordinary world with, the reservation reality. And also just, the coffee is a key factor in his life. And, in the script, we were going to play more comedy out of the coffee angle in terms of Kent in real life is obsessed with coffee, and getting a great cup is a big part of his day. But when we started playing everything through in the film, we always made choices where it wasn't as labored or as overemphasized. It's just sort of there. And here we're introduced to Dan really for the first time. And, with Dave playing this role, it's extraordinary just what he could transmit. Even in a simple scene like this, I mean, he just even watching it again for the millionth time, I just can't take my eyes off of him, because what he does in these scenes, it's just every time I would line up a shot like that, I would just be in awe, because he's just so beautiful to film. It's truly exquisite. And now we're just, simulating the journey and the change of landscapes that Nurburn has in his drive across the country, or a chunk of the country. And the funny thing is, when we were preparing the film, I actually flew over from the UK to Bemidji, Minnesota, where Kent was living at the time, and we took the actual road trip to Pine Ridge that's emulated in the story. And, it was quite a long trip, but I really wanted to learn as much as I could about how he is on that journey, and what is similar between us and what is different between us, and how he would be in certain situations. Now, this scene here is a funny one, because we turned up, we were actually due to do a scene inside the trading post, but an actress we had lined up to play a scene inside flaked out on us at the last minute, and so we had to figure out an alternative. And actually, I prefer the alternative, just having the trading post turn up to it. It's been closed for a while, and then him turning up, going around the back, and meeting Yellow Pony here. And he was terrific. He was always designed to be in the scene, but inside the cafe, the trading post. And so we just engineered the scene in a location nearby. And, Yellow Pony delivered really well on it. And a lot of times people ask how many times Kent shot, how many takes it took for him to get it in the basket. But I seem to recall that was the first take. And we actually shot a second take just to cover it, where he actually misses, because we just wasn't sure which would play better, but we went with the one that makes him look a little better. And I mean, we'd shoot these scenes pretty quickly. I mean, this was a location for it pretty close to the training post. And we really had such a tiny crew. I mean, on this day, just behind the camera, we have Rick, who was our sound guy, and myself. So there's just four of us there filming. And also shots like this we shoot in different days, and it was just Rick, myself, and Chris. So I mean, the sequence we've just seen, for example, was just filmed on 3 different days. And then we have this key scene, which I think often when you're preparing a film, you have a certain scene embedded in your mind that's often, key to unlock the whole film in your mind. And for me, it was always this initial meeting between Dan and Nurburn. It was always very present in my mind, how it would play out, the whole sort of dance of it, really. And I must admit, I love how it came together. This particular scene here is constructed in a very, very simple way. And it's one of these situations where you want to create a complete focus. I mean, where Nurburn is in this scene in his head is in a very intense spot. He doesn't know what to make of the situation, what's expected of him, certain trepidation. And it's one of these unusual things. It's strange normally in film to play a scene so silently. This first probably about 45 to 55 seconds without dialogue, and just in this quiet space, just setting the tone, and just doing it between 2 shots. I love how composed it feels. And this is in a real location. This location, I think we just secured, I think it was the day before filming, or maybe 2 days before filming. And it was the property of a mechanic who helped us out with a few things that our hosts knew. And we didn't touch the place, basically. It is exactly as it was, and we just moved the table a little bit. Very simply lit scene. Everything was done very quickly. Again, because of time constraints, we shot the film so fast that, I would set up the lighting for a scene like this just in a matter of minutes, just using 4 lights and the practical light that was in the room. And I mean, it was a very long dialogue scene, and naturally, because of Dave's age, memory is a bit of an issue. So, we spent quite a long time filming with him so that all the scenes were bedded down. And by the time we turned the camera around, because remember, we only used 1 camera in the film, so both the angles that you see are shot totally separately. And we maybe spent 2.5 hours, 3 hours perhaps, filming Dave's side of it, and then we turned it around and shot a scene, a take with Chris, and it wasn't till the end that we realized that we'd messed up, because the beginning handing of the tobacco was forgotten, and so he had the tobacco sitting in his pocket the whole time, and so that wouldn't work continuity-wise. And just tonally, I knew that it could be devised in a slightly different way that could play a little bit better. And so we did another take with those notes, and he just totally nailed it. Chris just totally grasped what I was looking for. And so everything that you see within the film, within the scene on Chris, is from this one single take. And after that, we just moved straight on. And that's incredibly rare. I mean, most of you won't understand, perhaps, not knowing how films are made, that sometimes you'll spend hours and hours and hours filming the simplest of scenes, and that a dialogue may be between different angles, between 2 shots and wider shots and closer shots. I mean, sometimes an actor might do the same scene 30, 40 times added up. This entire scene is composed of these 2 shots, and not even letting close-ups distract. here it's not important how his son looks. What is important is the interplay between the two men, how they absorb the information, particularly Nurburn absorbs the information, and how Dan sizes them up. And the amulet there is the real one that the real Kent Nurburn was given by the character, by the real person that Dan was inspired by. And it's funny, I look at a scene like this and I think of all the trouble I went to trying to find just something as simple as a plain shoebox. It turned out to be a bit of a struggle. In the end, you go around shoe shops, realize they're all branded, none of them will work, and it was actually one of the more tiresome things to find. I've eventually found some, but I mean, when we didn't have a crew, it was a case of me literally running around, having to, make up all of these things. Sometimes the night before filming, I'd be scribbling down these notes for the box of notes and that type of thing. And it's one of these, we got a nice little symmetry behind. You'll see on the one side this pipe leading up to the ceiling behind his head, and then behind Dan you have the chimney pipe from the stove. Just a nice little subliminal detail in the back, and like the fan behind Dan. These are things that were just naturally there, and I'm a huge fan of that. Art direction is a wonderful thing, and especially in very stylized pieces. But when you're doing something very real, for me, I want the texture of that, and I love presenting it to the actors. Actors are great at imagining things, but at the same time, when you present them with the reality and the texture all around, it can be much better for them to get immersed in a scene and lost within a scene. It's something that I've tend to try to do throughout most of my films. And we get to the end of this long scene, and Nurburn is now puzzled with what has been placed on his lap and how to deal with it. The scene had bookends in the script, but we just let that go filming. Now, this external of this motel is an interesting one because there was another car in the driveway, and it had nice window boxes and chairs and whatnot outside the building, and I removed them all digitally, made the slates on the roof look dirtier and things like that, removed some nice plants in the area. All did that in post-production just to make it look more barren, more dingy. And, these are the things that years ago you could never even have imagined doing. And, digital technology now isn't just about science fiction films and special effects, but it's sometimes something as simple as, making a wall look a little dirtier. That sort of thing. And this actually was a motel that was just outside Los Angeles. Chris and I shot a few of these small added sequences a few weeks after filming. Now, this scene here is a wonderful one because, the way I was shooting the film in master shots, here's an interesting master shot in the sense that because of the elevation, you get these layers within the scene. Normally, Dan, if the camera was lower, Dan would be blocking Nurburn in the chair when he sits down. But we have these nice layers, and particularly when Grover walks in, it just creates an interesting dynamic. And we shot it. We shot this initial take that had a lot of wonderful improvisations in it. The basic scene was plotted out, but once we started rolling, the actors really started to throw some wonderful things in there. It wasn't in the script, for example, for I don't think it was anyway, for Dan to fall asleep quite in that manner, and for the hat to come off. And, that was Dave's creation. And also where at the end Winona puts the bowl below the chair for the table for Fatback. Again, that was another lovely improvisation. And the final beat at the end where Chris gets up and turns and looks at Richard as Grover and decides that there's no way he could breach that space, and sits back down again. And, that's after having politely asked to get up. And they were all in the first take that we did. And it was so wonderful. It was one of those moments at the end we felt we could literally play the whole scene from that take. And the majority of it was. And then we shot a second take, and there was some other nice moments in that I picked out in small measure. But most of it's from that first take. And then for Dan's reactions, I shot that in the closer shot. But as you'll see, the only close shots are on Dan. So he's the one sort of driving the scene, and I wanted Nurburn to be sort of isolated in between them all. He's sort of stuck in them all, in between. And it's even that thing where the way that the light, frames Grover in a sort of foreboding way, it just adds a lot of texture. And again, what I'm saying about filming in a real location, I mean, if you look on these pillars, there's fly swatters on each of them. And, that's something that we would never have conceived of doing in an art direction standpoint, but it's just literally as it was in the location. And I love those details, like you having a barren wall there other than one picture frame in it. And the lamp, it's a really wonderful lamp. If we had an art director come in with a lamp like that, I would have been thrilled. Frames it beautifully at the top. It's again having the layers here. I mean, the way that the frame allows these actions without any movement in the stillness of the shot. It's sort of one of these things these days. I think people move the camera just for the sake of it so much in modern cinema, whether it's lazy handheld camera or dolly shots, just because they think it'll make the whole film more exciting. And, often it's just covering up lack of ideas. So it's kind of interesting filming in such a still way. A lot of my other films are very heavily edited and use a completely different set of styles. So it was really a lot of fun for me to be filming this way. And, we film typically out of sequence, but, so for example, all the scenes that we did at Dan's were all within a 2-day period. And, again, with the location, I mean, this is literally outside Dan's house. Normally you would probably travel across the area to find every spot that you wanted. But, because I loved this water pump with this bathtub below it. And, but this literally just was, right next to the house that we filmed in. And if you notice in the scene, the sun actually sets while we're filming. And so there's this great light shift that goes on through the take. And that happens a bit in the film, which is a really nice feature that I like. I mean, it was important for me that nature be a central character within the film. And, as it is in the Dakotas and as it is within the culture of the people of the story we're telling. And it's not just placing them within the landscape as they are, as it is in this scene and many others, but it's also the fact that, when we have such long takes, the light is changing. That is, the nature. We're not trying to control these elements, but they're dictating to us. And as you'll see by the end of this take, the sun has gone down. It is dark, but I mean, in a sense, it plays in the film like just clouds coming over, in terms of the placement of the time of day within the filming, and that's great. And I loved this scene. This was the third take that we did with these guys, and it wasn't just great for the light shift, but by that point they'd really nailed the scene. I think it was in the second take that Richard started banging the pages to the tom-tom sound, and it just really made it come alive. And I love the fact that this is his first scene in the film, Grover, and is because it really sets out his stall as a character wonderfully. Here on this hillside scene here, this is, the only really cutty sequence within the film other than the motel scenes. And it's really, again, utilizing style, having so much be so still in a single frame, and yet in these scenes showing the fracture going on inside of him. It's really showing the contrast between Dan's reality and his reality, and where and how Nurban's been pushed, and just utilizing some basic contrasts and technique to accentuate that. And also using, it becomes a pattern within some of the films, using these slow dissolves to pull us between the realities. Again, another very simple setup. And, of course, for the people in Indian country, we had to do the ever-expected in-joke of the commodity cheese, which is undoubtedly very true within a lot of my friends in Indian country, that the only thing that they get in commodities, if the family take commodities, that is enjoyed is the commod cheese, to the point where some friends of mine who are very, very successful, now living away from the reservations, do make sure that relatives can share some with them once in a while. It's interesting in a scene like this where, Winona is sort of, throws him an olive branch a little bit in terms of showing him the hospitality, and he takes it, as an act of kindness, as opposed to just, it's just a given. I mean, hospitality is such a key part of the environment and the culture. And, here it's sort of one of these things with some of the choices I opted to make. I really thought hard about the locations. In the novel, for example, the house that Annie's in later on is written very much similar to Dan's house, and I didn't want to repeat myself with that. And, Annie's a strong character and a matriarch. She'd be in a sort of more organized situation than that. And also, it gets a little tiring where a lot of reservation films are sort of kind of lost in the poverty of it all, and which certainly exists there. But, also this is a home on the reservation that's made into Grover's, or where Grover's living. We don't explain the details of it, but, there are people that live this, in a nice situation like this as well. And I didn't want it to be all the same sort of note, and, but to show, just a natural range. I mean, in terms of, I didn't overthink it either. It was very much based around, what was available for us and convenient within the realm of the reservation. He has that capacity the same as anyone else does. And that was, I think that's sort of one of the interesting things when you share this with the world, and you appreciate that certain people have certain preconceptions for whatever reason. And it's been nice that a lot of them have really fit well with the audience in this film so far. I mean, obviously we've nailed some elements totally right. I mean, in terms of the Buick, couldn't have been more perfect, for example. and then making, other choices like having a red truck instead of a black truck, or not having white shirts because they light terribly on film, and so you want things that visually, have more appeal. It's funny, this is a close shot of the box on fire. I actually shot that. That's one of the last shots that I did in the entire film, months after filming, and just did it in the garden of where I was staying in Los Angeles. These inserts you can pretty much shoot any time, and you just need the light and the backdrops to match. And getting the audio on this scene, we have the wonderful actor Zahn McLaren, who appears later in the film, with a huge, long boom microphone standing on top of the truck, just trying to get the audio on. He was around for a few days other than his filming, pitching in and helping any which way he could. And again, this scene is also, as was the last, on the land of our wonderful hosts. And the day that we were filming, the prairie dogs were feeling very shy. And so these inserts of them running around, I shot the day after we all finished filming. And I just went back there myself and created less of a disturbance so I could get some nice shots off with them. And it's such a luxury with the landscapes. And this literally was us shooting of these horses from almost the door of our host's property, just shooting at dusk, and just having them walk down the hill together onto the horses. It was just a beautiful little shot that we threw in. And, this is a sequence that, when we filmed it, it was Chris and I and nobody else, just in this motel. And, you're trying to figure out the best way of conveying his state of mind and pulling all of these thoughts together in a way that's concise. When you're trying to do things like that, time, you're trying to compress time, and these dissolves and overlays is a pretty effective way of doing that. And Chris here basically was improvising the phone call, and I'm pleased with how it comes out. I think it's important in these quiet moments for us to believably pull us into the headspace of Nurburn, so that so that the whole journey makes sense within his personal reality. In the novel, what's easier about the novel creatively is the fact that you're in the character's head. He is telling you everything that's going on. And, in the movie, we have to figure out all these mechanisms to be able to tell that and exhibit all that through, to go into his internal mental state. And in film, you don't have the luxury of having dialogue tell you, for the most part, just on the nose, because that can be really clumsy. So you've got to try and figure out the best ways of layering it in. And that's why, in a sense, the character in the film is a bit more edgy than in the novel. In the novel, Nurburn's a lot more passive, and that would have struggled on screen. The audience would have just not really been able to get their teeth into much there. And this is Roseanne's powerhouse scene as Winona, and she has two incredibly strong scenes in the film from both of the two granddaughters that she plays, and they're so different. And it's interesting because she has this ability that only the best actors have of making everything feel so incredibly spontaneous and in the moment. But I also know that she's very detailed in her preparation. She really comes in incredibly well prepared. And it's interesting because, as they're arguing, the way she gesticulates is really fascinating. It feels so ingrained in the moment and the character that, the other sister that she plays, Danelle, would never exhibit such gestures. It would just they're just so it's not something coming out of the performer per se, but it's so distinct within the characters that one individual character she's playing. It's really wonderful how much she nails it. And but they had a great back and forth through this scene. And I think Chris, it was great for him because, he'd had quite a few days leading up to this where he's hearing incredibly powerful stories. Remember, we're shooting out a sequence, so some of the more powerful scenes later on will have been filmed at this point. And so he'd had a number of days where he's actually doing a tremendous amount of listening. And so when he got to this scene, I think he was, very much looking forward to it because, it's such a great toe-to-toe acting scene that he knew he was going to have a lot of fun doing it, and it turned out really well. And again, I choose not to show the images because when you watch Winona play it, it would be so distracting, I think, to get lost in an image. I don't want to overplay those moments. I want the audience totally 100% concentrating on the characters. And even then, it's the choice of Nurburn's close-up and not Winona's, because it's, in a sense, the focus of the film. It's in the same way as earlier. We're cutting in closer on Dan, but not the rest of the room. It's making very distinct choices this way. I mean, normally a film would be going back and forth between equal close shots between them. But it wasn't really appropriate in this scene. And there's wonderful little moments like when she's away to slam the door, you'll see the reflection of the light of the door closing. It's a wonderful piece of movement. Make cuts seamless, and it doesn't even need to be a physical movement within the scene, but a something that catches the eye within the frame. And that moment of the reflection coming in with the light and brightening his face just for a little beat is a wonderful moment that way. And again, I'm trying not to overplay things. I mean, the car playing up here, I'm not trying to make it into some, overly extended, overly dramatic piece. And, it's a tricky game to play in a way, because that's what the audience's expectation is. The audience has an expectation of heightened drama because, cinema nowadays is just quite overblown in many ways. And, that's just sort of very much become the nature of it. And you'll notice here there's a bit of a stylistic change in the film. Very much the footage so far, for the most part, has been very composed. But since things are kind of falling apart a little bit for Nurburn here, at this point we resort to a couple of long Steadicam shots that are quite flowing. So we're much more present with him through these moments of strife. And this is a great moment here when we have Jumbo come forth. Jumbo is a very well-known character from the novels. He's a more prominent character in the subsequent two novels. And it was a question of really how would we be able to find a perfect Jumbo, and we had, as I say, very little budget, so it wasn't easy for us to just find and fly in anyone we'd wanted, and it was such a specific character. And Yellow Pony, who played the basketball kid at the beginning, he was wonderful and fixed me up with 3 different guys to audition, and they were all terrific, and amazingly all mechanics, as one would have it, and they all were of the right sort of size. But Harlan was just such a natural, and it was really incredible. He just nailed it all with very, very little direction. And this was the end of the first shot where we've moved back and forth 3 times with what's going on, and there's definitely a certain choreography that you try to attain with some of these moving shots. I mean, you got a lot of logistics to deal with the garage here, which was a truly real location. You had to deal with, a lot of rubble on the ground, which makes doing a Steadicam shot like this harder. And, but you try to make it fluid, the movements, when I'm operating the camera. taking it inside here and going with the shots. And the funny thing is, in the next section where he pops his head out and we see the guys there standing there waiting for him, which always gets a good laugh with the audience. I'm back to two fixed shots because, in a sense, they're stabilizing the situation again. We're in sort of Dan's composed world as opposed to the frenetic that Nurburn's going through at this point. And I was setting up the camera in this position here, and I was looking down through the branches and whatnot below my feet, and I noticed there were some broken up boards there, and looked through and saw that it was dark below, and suddenly realized that I was on very rotten boards that were just loosely straddled across some form of well. It was quite a deep hole there, and with a heavy camera and everything else that I had in my arms at the time, it's amazing that they didn't give, and I could have had a nasty spill. It might have been the end of the film right there and then. And again, this is one of those nice things that, when you got interplay going on with the characters like this, you're beginning to start seeing more range of dynamics between them all. And, again, Harlan, who plays Jumbo, just sort of fit in perfectly within it. There's such a beautiful range of dynamics between them all. It's one of these things that when you've got a lot of money, you can buy in great actors. When you've got the budget we had, I have to say I was just hugely, hugely lucky. One of the different challenges with filming on somewhere remote like Pine Ridge Indian Reservation is that you don't have access to the normal resources you would have on a film. And certainly with our minute crew, it was even more stretched than that. So we were incredibly fortunate that the O'Briens who hosted us lent us certain things that we might have needed that would have been hard to get otherwise. And one of the key things central to this was our fatback. And this was a dog that they had. And in the novel, it's a different kind of dog. And, we were scouring around the reservation trying to find one that worked. And then Kent was there and took one look at Rosie here, the dog, which is a corgi, and just thought, this dog is the fattest back of any dog he'd ever seen. And what a perfect fat back. So the decision there was his call. And this scene in the gas station here was just something very quick we did. Just sort of, because we can't control locations, so we just went and shot it. And there was a car alarm going throughout the whole scene, and through the music, the magic of audio design today, I managed to very cleverly remove the car alarm that was going through all their dialogue without it being noticed. And it's really incredible what you can do with technology today. And literally behind the camera position here is the ranch house we were staying in. This was just a few feet away from where we would park at the end of each filming day. And the land around there was so beautiful that it allowed us, on so many occasions when we were chasing our tail a bit schedule-wise, we could just grab an extra shot just without leaving the premises. And it was really essential to how we worked it. Particularly because a lot of the time we're filming when we want the light a particular way, and so it limits the times of day you can do it. This location is still on their land, but a little bit further away from where they parked up. And in a scene like this, we're concentrating on the dialogue. Again, everything's being shot incredibly quickly, and so the cutaways are not sort of something that you could think about spending the time on shooting when you're in such a rush. And it's quite typical in normal films. They have second unit directors who will pick things off separately. We don't have such a luxury. But here, we did not have any buffalo nearby to get the point of view shot here that comes in. But, so what I had to do was I had to, recreate this shot at a later date and, basically planting in on the landscape the buffalo. And it's the only way you can really do such a thing on the level of budget that we had. So it's one of those things where you spend a lot less time on location because you're filming really quickly, but you end up spending a lot longer in post-production doing all the computer wizardry. I mean, this was a crucial scene in the film because it's where, the first time I think that Nurburn realizes that he's not just deep in over his head as a writer, but also, as a human being, being, taken to a place he's not prepared necessarily to go. And a shot like this coming up the hill, essentially, we just finished filming a day scene, and then I just ran ahead and jump out of the car, set up the camera, and by the time the guys are coming up the hill behind me, I banked the shot and move on. This scene here actually was the first key scene that we filmed in the entire film. One of the good things that it worked about it energy-wise was that in the evenings that Dave's there, but he can just relax through the scene, and it's a complicated sequence to film. I'm in a vehicle in front, and I'm trying to get these shots off with in focus, which is a hard thing to do because the car's distance keep moving, and also being in transmission with them. And it was the road that we did it on was basically there was about a mile-long approach road in the property we were staying in, so we just went back and forth, up and down, which gave us a great controllable space. And, again, this is one of those dialogues where, that's more of the film than the novel. It's about introducing us more deeply to, Nurburn's motivations and, again, the how he's placed within his own journey at the moment in terms of having just lost his father, and Grover's probing. And so it's sort of one of these scenes where you try to make as multidimensional as possible within what is, just a two-way conversation. And that's one of the great challenges when you're making a film is how to keep everything interesting when, a lot of the time, that you just have to convey certain pieces of information. And that doesn't necessarily have to be the most interesting thing in the world to watch. So it's about creating a lot of the nuance, the personal moments, and how it informs on character. And it was also that thing when filming the car scenes. We had in the script, quite a bit more of it was set in the car on the road trip, but again, the thing you want to do is avoid things becoming repetitive. I mean, the car scenes are typically shot in different ways. This way's shot differently to the other ones where, for example, the camera's built onto the car. This makes it feel a little more uneasy because you got the movement of the car in a completely different way. And but it was also about bringing them out of the car, as I say, on some of the other scenes, so that we could enjoy, more of the landscape of it as well. And actually, just previous to this scene was actually the only dialogue scene of any significance that was cut from the film. It was, excuse me, one of those things where you just have to work out the weighting of everything and the pacing of everything in a film. Pacing in a novel is a completely different affair. Now, this scene we were incredibly lucky in because if you watch the timing there, Fatback had been sleeping in Nurburn's lap, and you'll see as Nurburn gets out and the dog starts to appear right at the point where Grover says a line about the dog. And the key thing here is you'll see the dog scurrying down, and then the crucial part is taking this step to the left. In an earlier take, the dog went straight up to Grover. And the problem with that was that I knew when we cut to the closer shot, the dog would never do the same thing twice. So I had to call cut just for continuity issues. And the fact that in this occasion, the dog just randomly perfectly walked in the frame at the optimum moment, and then hooked off to the left was truly perfect. And this is an interesting location. It's where a smaller river hits the White River, and as you can see, the water on the right is a different color, and they merge, just how they merge together. It's a nice little locations detail. The drum that's on the back there, we'll see in the next scene as well, being carried by Grover. And actually, I was going to do another scene at the tail of the next one, but just chose against it when we were filming. But it's still, nice having those details there. One of the things that is often done with a drum is that it's left close to a fire so that the heat tightens the skin, so you get a better tone on it. And at this ruin, it's the second time I filmed there. I filmed a scene in my movie Razbomb there a few years ago, in a different part of it. And we actually traveled a long way for it, because it really, I mean, it speaks for itself. I just really loved the tones and textures within the walls here. That's the thing with when you've got a very low budget and you're not creating any of your locations, you have to be, find the right balance between efficiency, but also, getting the best location you can conceivably get at no cost. And so, to light a scene like this, I basically haven't done anything other than having one light hitting the stairs in the distance, just to give them a slightly different tone, just to make them pop a little bit more. And this was this was the third day's filming, and it was a very big day. We shot 3 scenes at Wounded Knee, and then we rolled down here, which was, I say, quite a distance away, and then we finish off doing the museum scene, and had about maybe 80-minute long drive back at the end of it. And it was a terrific day. Dave was just on fire that day, had a lot of fun with some of the scenes, and had a great energy about him that day. And so, it was great it was the first day where we bagged a lot of scenes. And when you're shooting, it becomes an affair of logistics as much as anything. You have a certain number of targets of things to film, and a short amount of time to do it. And, this is one of those scenes that's a bit of a cheat, in that, the interior of the car, we're filming at our main location where we're hosted, with buildings behind, and then the point of view shot is elsewhere. The signposts on that museum shot that we just saw walking in, of Dakota Museum, and the phone sign, I actually put in post-production on a computer. Again, I did that a number of times with the signs, because as we travel across the country, we're going from North to South Dakota, and yet, we filmed in a much smaller area than that. So some of the signs, were sort of cheating some of the locations, as is always done in film. And again, this museum, we traveled quite a long way to go to, because for me it was just so perfect. Although we needed just this basic one space. This museum's in Rushville, Nebraska. There's a lot of other smaller rooms off of it with some fascinating things in it. And the lady here, when I was casting, I was struggling to find anyone who would fit the role. And when I'd been in this museum before, the person there had a European accent, was a very old gentleman from Denmark, I think it was. And so I liked that. And the lady here playing the scene is Josie Baldeagle, Dave's wife, who was a Belgian actress before they met. So it was amazing. She was happy to jump in and do the role, and I'm so grateful for her for doing that. But it also is just this beautiful memory of seeing them both on screen together. It's very, very nice. And she was around for most of the filming, helping just around some of the things with the shoot, as well as looking after Dave, and it was terrific having her help and support. But this dynamic here is very interesting. The pipe that he talks about or Dave talks about in the scene just before, and the pipe and the stem being attached, and that being wrong, that's how it was actually in this museum, and the gentleman in the museum immediately rectified that, so it was appropriate, and that was very nice. That was very touching, actually. It's one of those nice things when you do a film and you're bringing two communities together in a way that they might not otherwise, because you're bringing people into different spaces, and that's really terrific. We did a lot of scenes in the town of Kyle on Pine Ridge. This is there, cheating for a border town much further north, and just shooting here on a steady cam, just again trying to get nice long continuous takes, both for the pacing and the feel of the film. And here's another sign. This sign here, North Dakota, this actually, the writing on that sign I completely fabricated in post-production. It actually is in South Dakota in Kyle as well. And the scene here in the cafe, this was one of the more complicated scenes being filmed, in the sense that it had the most moving parts of any scene. We have nine characters on screen. And I found, I filmed all the different components, but as I was editing it, it really became clear to me that the key was to focus on our, three protagonists here at the table, and concentrate on their reactions and how it's very much absorbed. And so that seemed to create the most tension for me, and most importantly, inform on their characters to the greatest degree. And when you're casting a film, you look at a number of roles in very different ways. Some you look at being very fun opportunities for an actor, and other times you look at a scene with some concern, because you know that for it to work, you need an extraordinary actor to fill the role, because anything else will be like a house of cards. And this was that role in this film. Zahn here, who plays the character Billy, Zahn is just one of the best actors that I know. Extraordinarily professional, and his passion for it is phenomenal. I've seen him prepare for auditions in far more detail than a lot of actors pay for their actual working roles. And because of that, he's forged an incredible career. He's working on so many, with so many great roles and great productions at the moment. And I've never known an actor who deserved it as much. And he really brings a humanity to this role. Somebody without his ability would have probably overplayed it or made it feel stereotypical. But it was crucial that I liked this guy. I've met people like this guy on a number of occasions, and often find them very sweet and kind, and with a layer of vulnerability. And so, I was so happy that he was the one that could bring that to the screen. And Wam Lee, who plays his partner, again, it's for her to convey the right level of vulnerability, which I think she does very well. And here we've got the difference in reactions. Nurburn doesn't know what to do with himself. He just feels awkward. Dan, it's sort of that thing. It would be a different situation if they weren't in a border town cafe. And, it's interesting with Grover, because Grover has this incredible strength, but also compassion. But it's a tough love compassion. It's not, an airy-fairy one. And I think he really conveys that beautifully in this scene. It's one of the great things about this film, I think, is that, the casting is so rich that it's just such a joy to examine the faces of the characters. I could watch these guys day in. Well, I have been watching them day in, day out while editing, and I still am fascinated with watching them. There was a longer dialogue from Dan at the end of this scene, but when we tested the film, it just was a little confusing. So that was just chopped off the end. Now this scene here with the Steadicam, it got the camera I was filming in was incredibly heavy, and the rig that was attached to my body was as well. So after filming a few of these takes, it really took its toll on me. And there was also, we had a problem with filming later in the day, and shadows starting to form from myself following them, which got a little complicated. So we actually couldn't keep filming this scene. But one of the things I like about it is the energy that it has, the sense of presence that we have, starting off in front of them, following them for a while, and then at this point, moving into close shot, a closer to shot, while they're having more of the confrontation. And it's sort of that thing in the film, you're when you've got a camera mobile like that, you're trying to dance with the actors. I always say you're looking for the right energy to move in and through it with them. And it was sort of in the script and into the film. I mean, Kent never wanted the character of Nurburn to be anyway central to the film. It was more just him looking through, or us looking through his eyes to principally Dan, but also Grover and the other characters that come along the way. Kent was always uncomfortable with the notion of Nurburn as a white guy being a central character. Whereas I was adamant that for it to work as a film, you can't dilute any of your characters. That's just betraying the film, regardless of any dynamics or wanting to avoid one of those sort of cliched native films where it's still a white lead. This is a film about three men and the journey they go through together. So, and as part of that, we, Nurburn, the character, and especially as we filmed and Chris and experienced a lot of these things along the way, it was sort of natural that he would push back a little bit more than on the page, just because the tension becomes so great in some of the moments on the journey, and in a sense Grover wants that. I mean, Grover wants to feel like he pushes him up against his edges, to really see who he is. And Grover wants to see the fight. If he didn't have the fight, then I don't think Grover would trust him with the job. This scene was initially it was written to be done in the back of the Buick. They gave them a lift, but the Buick had broken down the day before, and we had to get it up and running again. So that just wasn't possible. But also, as I say earlier, I was keen to try and get the film out of the car a bit more. And so this worked out fine. And it was just close by around the back of the cafe. These confrontation scenes, the guys, I think, enjoy doing quite a lot. They're pretty fun, meaty scenes to get your teeth into. And I think for Chris especially, it was interesting. We'd done quite a few days where, he's central to everything, but he actually had little or no dialogue in some of the scenes. And so when we sort of got round to this point, he was, I just think, happy to jump in with both feet and play with these scenes. We were very lucky with, some of the spots we found. I mean, just even the texture of the fading paint in the background. It's sort of thing that if I had the good fortune of having a budget to have art directors, then, these are some of the choices that I would have been very happy for them to have made. But I also like the randomness of having the ladder on the ground and the hose pipe coming up from it and things like that. And again, it's a choice about using Steadicam at the right moment. Typically, in moments of more bold action from Nurburn or dramatic moments. And here we have it's perfect because the dog's looking out the window, which was desired, but that it's not a trained dog, so some of those things were random. And here we snap into slow motion for a moment just to emphasize a moment. And that was something, I was talking to Chris about the film, and he was sort of talking about how it would be nice to have had a more concentrated moment at that point. And the wonderful thing with post-production techniques today is that, we have a lot of control over what we can do in moments like that. And I just love that Buick. It just, it's so cinematic. And again, I mean, a lot of these driving shots we would do in big batches because it took a while to, hook up the camera to the vehicle. It was quite complicated. And so we would typically do them in sort of big, long batches and insert them when they were required through the rest of the film. This scene here, again, was filmed just right by our base. We just pop out after dinner and knock out a scene like this. And I'd employ techniques that were somewhat, unconventional. Normally you shoot a scene in order, but I shot the last part of it first, where Dave comes into the vehicle, so that once we'd gotten those shots, he could then go inside and be warm and just enjoy the rest of his evening. So he didn't have to wait around for the hour or so that we filmed the rest of the scene in. This, I think, was probably about 2/3 of the way through filming, and at a point where the dynamics between the actors was really terrific, and there's a lot of confidence in their performances. And it's important to have that when you're hitting some of these more subtle scenes, particularly with where Grover's at within it. It's interesting just seeing the fragmentedness of Nurburn, because it has to be very delicate. We can't do it in a movie sense of just everything hyped up. We have to get this sense of Nurburn trying to be as appropriate as possible and be as respectful as possible, but at the same time, some of the time being mad and feeling like he's being made a fool of, and it's very complicated. And I'm really always thrilled when I watch the film and I see how how Chris managed to exhibit all of that. The scenes at Annie's house play a bigger part in the novel and in the original script, but the thing was that you have only so much time to tell the story, and so you have to pick your moments. And in the novel, she's living in a house which is kind of similar to Dan's a bit. No power, water, that sort of thing. But, I always saw Annie as a real matriarch character, and she's somebody who would sort things out and would be somewhere a bit more comfortable than that for me. And so, I came up with more of the typical scenario in that, world with the trailer. And it was interesting making this pot of food, because I was trying to make it look as unappetizing as possible. And every time Chris brought it up to his nose, I mean, it was, I think, pickled pig's trotters or something like that, with a lot of vinegar and things like that in the soup, so that it would just make him want to hurl as he sniffed it. Here this is just a light little scene, but it's sort of that classic Lakota joke about a puppy stew. And Annie was, again, one of those roles where I wanted somebody who could really convey it well, but finding, anyone with the acting experience on the reservation was going to be incredibly hard. But fortunately, I discovered that Dawn Little Sky here lived about maybe 25 miles away from where we were based. And she used to live in Hollywood for many years, as her husband was Eddie Little Sky, who was famous for being one of the first native actors on film to be playing native predominantly, as opposed to that terrible thing of having lots of non-Indian actors playing all those roles on screen. And so she'd been in movies quite a lot before that. And so it was just, again, one of those things, incredibly fortunate to find someone with the right experience and the right feel, but close to our base. We had a lot of luck that way, and even with from the weather to the jumbo characters and things like that. And I look back and with sort of amazement at the film, because I'm filming so quickly in such an ad hoc way that every one of these things that came off was a little miracle. And here we have Tatanka Means' appearance as Danelle's partner Delvin. And the kids here, two of them are the kids of Yellow Pony, who played with the basketball at the beginning. And he brought them in for the filming and was terrific. And they're just so natural here. I mean, again, I had no right to expect such good fortune, but they just felt so at home there. And here we have Roseanne as Danelle here, such a different energy to how she played Winona. And but Tatanka the night before had been performing his stand-up. He's a well-known stand-up comedian as well as a terrific actor, and he'd been performing at a Nebraska casino, and had gotten up about 5 o'clock in the morning, driven about 6 hours with his wife and incredible daughter to come film. And then we filmed for a few hours, and then by about 6 p.m. they were heading south to Albuquerque, which is a huge drive. And I was just so grateful that he took so much time out of his way to contribute his role to the film. And he was just wonderful to work with. But I've known Tatanka for a number of years. I was very good friends with his father. And Tatanka is just one of the finest human beings I've ever met. He's an exceptional, exceptional guy, and with a wonderful family. And he brings a nice energy to the role. He, he's sort of the first person that's sort of, easygoing with Kent, not giving him a hard time. But it's interesting, when I look at the performance of Roseanne, it's moments like this that make me so impressed. It's how you can inhabit a moment in a space like that when you're on your own, with no dialogue to as a crutch, and you can totally grasp the space that they're in. It's really wonderful. And here again is the simple filming style, letting a frame do it all, and then cutting inside. And we filmed this later in the day, and actually it was dark outside, but we liked it in a way that it cheats that it's still light outside. And actually, I'm looking at it right now, and I could easily have forgotten that myself. It works so well. And here is one of those key revelations in the film about Dan's background, and basically what Kent has been asked to do, and the weight of what he's being asked to do. And this was, as I say, I mean, Tatanka was around just for a few hours, and so we're having to film all of this very, very quickly. And that's what is so stunning about having such professionals on set, because they nail it so easily. You could be battling performances for hours normally with some pretty well established actors, but these guys are at the top of their game. And that was the last shot we did of Dave, actually, just before he hit the road we just quickly needed one cutaway shot of him with the dog, and spent a few seconds doing it, and then off he went on the final day. This scene here, it's one of those things where when you normally have a very long dialogue scene, typically in a film, certain lines will be cut along the way. You'll be editing back and forth between close shots, medium shots, two shots, and really constructing it in the edit. But in this one, partly because the sun was setting and time was just an issue as always. Basically, we filmed this wider shot, and then we go into the tighter shot, which in which most of the scene runs for, and we did one take of each. There was no messing around beyond that. Just literally, everything you're seeing here is her, running through the whole thing. And, there's no opportunity to fix any errors or cut any lines that might be excess to requirements. Unfortunately, it's such a powerfully written scene, and she, plays every moment perfectly, that just this one take is, what we are enjoying on screen. And, the hope is that, people watch the film and they've no understanding of these things. Because how the film is made should be irrelevant to the audience, but it's really seat of your pants filmmaking, because towards the end of some of these takes, if right now there was a problem, we got to the end and went for another, then the light is changing so fast that we would we would lose it probably. And the hard thing is, well, for the other guys through this is to truly get the sense of them being present and listening. Sometimes on screen, that's one of the hardest things to do when you're just having to react to somebody for a long time, particularly because the nature of the dialogue. So it's not like you're reacting to something you're hearing for the first time, but you have to really convey that, and also in a way that is not necessarily overly expressive, because Nurburn is not going to do that. So it's how they absorb it all. It's really wonderful. Although, I love that Chris there has the dog, because it's exactly what Kent would be doing in that situation as well. The dog would be, in a sense, a point of comfort and distraction for him through it as well. Both Chris and Kent are incredible dog people. I'm not at all, but it was actually very useful, because if Kent didn't have that affection for dogs, I think it would be one aspect of the Nurburn character that would be missing on a very subtle level. And these things all add up. And Kent is incredibly happy with Chris's performance, which is an incredible tribute to Chris, because it's a very hard thing for somebody to watch someone on screen essentially playing a version of them, and and also doing it in a different way, because we made certain changes. And Kent was always incredibly receptive. I mean, I think as a good artist is, I mean, they should, typically we're receptive to good ideas and good performances, but I think he was a lot more open than a lot of novelists are when they do adaptations. I think the key behind it was that, he knew that our central priorities were the same, which was we were never going to take an easy option stylistically to sensationalize anything, and that we were always going to, honor the reality of the world that it's set in, and and he wanted Dan truly honored on screen. And the beautiful thing was that, for me, it was not just honoring Dan, but it became a celebration of Dave on screen. So it became doubly powerful, and we're very grateful for it. It's a miraculous thing, really. And then we start heading towards the heaviest part of the movie. South Dakota, I mean, it's a luxury to film there, because you have so many incredible landscapes. And I toured an extraordinary number of locations throughout the state and into North Dakota, but you can't spend hours and hours and hours driving on such a tight schedule or shifting your whole location. So I knew Pine Ridge very, very well. It was close to an airport as well, and picked a lot of locations there. And this church, for example, was somewhere that I'd known for many years, my favorite back road on the reservation. And so, I mean, it's wonderful when we get all the beautiful compliments about how good the film looks. But to be honest, it was all filmed so very fast that the main reason that it looks so beautiful is just South Dakota, or particularly, I mean, Pine Ridge. I mean, or you go up to Cheyenne River and Standing Rock in that area as well, or the Black Hills. It's really worth exploring and experiencing. But this is more representative of how so many of the scenes in the novel are. Dan coming out with one of his pet theories or whatever else. And the thing was that, there was only so much we could do in the film, because with a film you have to establish character, plot, situation, all those sorts of things. And, once we've established that Dave is imparting this knowledge, in a sense, we kind of have to move on. And I know that when we were preparing it, we'd have a lot of people asking, are you going to put this speech in or this speech in or whatever else? And, it was a hard choice to make of which ones to include. A lot of these shots and these little driving montages are all filmed at different occasions, just depending on where the camera was set up and what we were doing at the time. And doing the storm was a bit of a challenge because we were filming in October, and most of the storms in South Dakota are more prone to the summertime. And I had to be a bit imaginative about how we went about it. But again, the key thing with it all, and the thing to always remember in filmmaking is, what's the emotional reality of the characters and how present are the audience within those moments. And again, it's this wonderful thing for me of us being lost in their faces. This is a particularly interesting scene for me in terms of Dave's performance, because I think more instinctively than anything, he knew how to play the scenes. And he, when I explained to him that he has to be short and impatient with Kent in how he challenges him here, he really nails it. I just feel sorry for poor Kent in the back seat, wondering what on earth is going on all the time. And, actors normally, there's, it's easy to be self-conscious and to overthink things normally because, everything's relying on you. If you can't nail a scene, then they have to keep filming and everyone's attention is on you. But because of us filming so fast and with such a tiny crew, and with so many random things happening, I mean, we might be filming something and then the Buick breaks down, and then the next couple of hours, Chris, who is a fantastic mechanic, might be fixing it. So you couldn't get absorbed in yourself as an actor. And so I think that freed them up a lot and meant that everyone was in the moment much more, rather than being self-conscious about anything. And that was really really terrific. There's a lot of great benefits in the film like that. And this is one of my favorite moments coming up here. I just visually love seeing this drive up to essentially the sort of wall in front of you that the Badlands is presenting at that point. And this is driving up to Sheep Mountain, and I've been there many times over the years. It's a lovely view, and this is sort of lunar type landscape, very, very striking. And again, although saying that, I mean, the Badlands, there's so many stunning views that there are others that I might have even, preferred more, but logistically weren't sensible for us to do. And this scene in the car here is a classic example of how, when you think about so many of the scenes that I've filmed up till now have been wide shots, single frames with all the characters in it, letting things unfold. And yet here we have a scene that, other than them driving in, is just on close shots. They don't share a frame together. And it's a scene about listening as much as it is about anything else. And because other scenes were filmed more in the big shots, the wide shots, this feels so much more compressed and more claustrophobic and intense. And that is as a result of the difference between the style of some scenes versus the others. If the whole film had been shot this way, and some people do shoot everything pretty conventionally and in two shots and then close shots or whatever, then you wouldn't have that shift. And here, when we filmed this, the camera's outside the car. I'm filming through the glass, and you do it in a way where you get no reflections. And and we're actually on Sheep Mountain, so the wind is whistling by, and it's very, very intense. And at the end of it, we were all so drained and moved that I truly felt at that point that I would never in my career film a more moving, powerful scene. Although, to be fair, just 2 weeks later on our final scene with Chris and Dave, the main dialogue at Wounded Knee, we at least hit it, but in a different way, and that was at least as powerful. Again, it was really remarkable. And this is an incredibly effective scene in my view. It's you're looking at actually what the guys are doing, listening. Even it's Chris is there being bombarded with this, and with all the other emotions the characters got going on. It's how to even we're seeing him being affected by it, but then how does he? But then he doesn't want to show being affected by it. He doesn't want the guys to see him in an emotional way or whatever. So there's a lot of complexity to it, but we didn't have to worry about that, because in these moments, Chris doesn't have to act a damn thing, because the power of the words is so extraordinary, and it just hits home so hard that you just have to be, a decent human being, and Chris is that and more. And with Richard here, hearing any elder tell these stories, which Richard will have heard sadly way too many times, it just hits home so incredibly powerfully. And so, these scenes are, they've never been technical for me. You edit a lot of things over a long period, and you start looking at them in a technical way, but I've never watched this film in a technical sense, because it just hits home for me so powerfully every time. I'm as proud of this scene as I just about am of any I've ever done. And I could have filmed it elsewhere. I could have filmed it at her base, because out the windows you don't see anything. But for us being up in that remote peak with the wind buffeting around, I think just put us in the right place for it. I think that's one of the things you've always got to think about with filming is sometimes, the fakeness will take you out of the place you need to be in for a different reason. And a film like this is just so powerful that we had to search for that ultimate truth most, and that was always the priority, other than just, purely getting through each day. And that was actually quite early on in the filming. It was our first really, really big emotional scene, and we were just so grateful to get it in the bag. And what I would do a lot, instead of doing driving montages, I would go with one longer shot like this, to me, that just sort of said it all. And then now we're moving. And this shot here is the only one in the entire movie that I had totally pre-planned in my head before going out on location and filming. Most of the time I turn up and make the choices then and there. But this one, I remember being at home in Los Angeles and it just coming to mind that this was the best way of doing it. But in the end, we filmed it again in one take. This is only one take. And everything about it for me is immaculate. I mean, even just Dave improvising there, saying, slow down, and the way he said it with such authority, and the way he's looking right now, and Grover with such seriousness, and Nurburn with trepidation. But you have to appreciate at this point, I'm sitting on the floor of the car next to Chris's left arm, and I have a monitor in my hand, and I have a trigger switch to operate the camera with. So through this whole scene, I'm in the car as well. Hoping I'm ruining it for you by giving away the magic. But in that shot, I'd envisaged pulling up here and seeing the Wounded Knee Monument at the edge of frame, and then walking out towards it. And this all happening in the one shot. And I'm so proud of this scene because it conveys exactly what I wanted. It really comes out perfectly. And even this thing of, Nurburn looking almost for, approval from Grover, and then Grover giving this little nod. Just what they did with this scene in one take, for me, was just perfect. And filming at Wounded Knee for me was a very delicate business because it's the most sacred place for me on earth. It's what brought me out to Lakota country now 17 years ago, and set me on this incredible journey. And before our first day filming there, or our first few scenes we filmed there on one occasion, Dave did the most incredibly moving ceremony. And but in this scene here, I'm walking in with a Steadicam, and again, this is all just one take in the film. I was going to cover it more, but it was a long walk. It went on a bit longer than we use in film, and you just we've got to think of a 95-year-old's energy levels, but it just turned out this way that it became so powerful, and Dave is purely improvising at this point, because he is Dan and Dan is Dave, and no more so when they're in these scenes. And so everything he's saying is from the heart. Kent and I would never dream to be able to think we could write it as powerful as he could say it. And we got to the end of this take, and I played it back, and it was just, yep, that's it, move on. And Josie's Dave's wife, she had the audio played back to her in the car because the audio is recorded separately from the image, and just listening to it, and she's an incredibly strong human being. And she was weeping just listening to Dave in the scene. It was one of the true treasured moments in the film. But we'd also tried not to have much impact there with our filming. So, in this scene, we just drove up, and I mounted the camera on my body. We filmed the walk in, and then cleared out, and then did the drive-in shot again as a single shot, and then cleared out. And then the dialogue scene we shot away from there, so that we were in a very, very private place. And again, as I'm saying, he's improvising here, but he's talking about his own journey, his own life, his own relatives, and how and what Wounded Knee is to him. And in this scene, we started working off of a two-shot, and again, Dave improvising. But it was more, he was in a more logical space, so he was talking about some historical elements. And it wasn't really getting to the place that needed to. So we lined up first this close shot on Dave, and we had him improvise for about 8 minutes. And it was going into much more of the dramatic, the emotional reality of the film. not the film of Wounded Knee, and and the emotional impact of it, and then how that hits Chris. And then we turned the camera around and filmed about 8 minutes on him. But both sides are improvised, so there's random elements to both. So editing it becomes an interesting challenge because you're not having the same words being said in both sides of the take. But in the end, you end up with something much more powerful. I mean, none of the emotions here are faked. There's not a ounce of acting going on here. This is two men opening themselves up to each other, and at the end of it, we were all so drained, and it was just myself, Rick, the sound guy, and Chris and Dave, and it was beyond emotional. I can't tell you how much so. And, Dave went places in himself and talked about things he'd never talked about before, or things that he'd been holding in, as all Lakota, one way or another, hold in a lot of this tragic history. And in the novel and in the script, a lot of it was much more about Kent at this point. Certain things being the impact on him, and actually a lot of it more cinematic, ironically. But I had no interest in doing anything that felt added on, anything like flashing back to history or flashing back to a different reality or an imagined reality or anything like that. For me, I was very strict about the rules of this film being in a very concentrated present reality, and not using tricks cinematically, which I've got nothing against cinematic tricks. I've utilized them a lot in other films and love the full toolbox, but this had to be much more composed and spare and as honest as it could conceivably be. And so when Dave says that, tell your people that you're ashamed, that just comes out of Dave and hits Chris, in the most personal, powerful way. And, you just can't write that stuff. It's just way too impactful and powerful. Very, very proud of these men. And this was actually on a hill, still on the land of our hosts, away from Wounded Knee, because it would have dishonored Dave to have had anyone walking around while we were doing this. It would have dishonored just the seriousness of the moment. And also, I wanted to avoid shooting too much at Wounded Knee. I just wanted to get the necessary shots and in the most respectful way possible and move on. But always, for everything I've filmed on Pine Ridge, I've always had phenomenal support from the tribal administration and the people there. This is the third feature I've shot on Pine Ridge, and I just have the most incredible, beautiful relationship with people there, and find filming there incredibly rewarding and easy. But again, this is, we're getting these beautiful shots because of, filming at the right time of day for lighting and, maximizing the beauty of a moment as much as possible. It's fascinating when you start getting feedback from a film to get a sense of where the audience emotionally are at a certain place. And one thing that's been said about this scene by one or two people is that it was perfect for them because it was like emotionally they needed to lie down at this point in the film and have a rest because of just the impact and the emotion that they'd been feeling from the previous scene. And I think that's one of the things as a filmmaker, when you're doing it well, you have to be very conscious of is energies and where the energy of the audience is. Certain times they need to lift, certain times they need to laugh, and and so on. And so for me, it was after the drama of the Wounded Knee dialogue. It was about gently bringing the audience out with Nurburn. Um, so we had those private moments because I think the audience needed those private moments with him, and now the two of them walking out together again. We actually did another dialogue scene that was in between, but it was a little bit surplus to requirements. And now we're hitting a sort of a bit of a lighter tone as we bring Grover back in. And now you will see, Grover's attitude changes a bit. Now he's just essentially playful with Nurburn. He doesn't need to test him anymore because they've been, at the climactic point of the journey. And so, which is nice. It's nice getting these lighter moments. And actually, the majority of the scenes finishing now up to the finale scene were all shot in the first 3 days of filming because I wanted to lightly break the actors in so they could find their feet in character. So these light dialogue scenes, the playful ones, were sort of where they started to find their feet with it, and that worked out very well. The climactic scene at Wounded Knee was the last major scene that we shot before Dave left, and they'd really built up the point where emotionally they could as fully achieve that as possible. And again, we have these sort of nice little light moments. The point of view shot here of the truck was filmed at the very end because you don't need the characters there for those cutaway shots. But again, a nice lightness of tone, and this is just again filming on the land that we were based, and playfully bringing us back into the climax. Again, I would have probably been sitting. I think I was sitting in the side seat. I think at this point with my head down, probably, and. The problem with some of these scenes is matching the light as you're cutting between all the different shots. And this was due to be filmed in the same day as the previous Jumbo scene, but the Buick broke down, so I had to split it into 2 days of filming. And this was one of our later days in the shoot that we shot in Kyle. We had a terrific day that day. We got a great number of scenes in the bag. And this is the most conventionally filmed scene in the entire film because we've now stepped away from the tensions and whatever of the journey. So you'll see I use a lot more shots than normal. I'm using, much more closer shots and then wide shot here, and cutting between all the different characters more completely because we're back to this is the first time in the film we're in just sort of a normal reality. And here's the nice touch of Grover having the phrase on the bag pointing to Nurburn when he got back in the vehicle, and the nice little dynamics between them all. This is a cute scene, and as I say, the amulet that gets handed over at the end of the scene was the real amulet given to Kent Nurburn, the author, by the Dan that was in his life. Although there was more than one elder that was a big influence on him and the character in the novel, but in addition to the principal Dan. And I just love Harlan in all of these scenes. I mean, he's a much bigger character in the subsequent two novels, and unfortunately, Dave is very old now, and it's hard to get films made, and they take a very long time. I mean, it would be wonderful to have done all three, but it's, a reality that's hard to imagine. But I'd love to see more of Harlan on screen. And, these moments were always very touching because Dave and Chris had such a beautiful bond. I mean, they're both veterans apart from anything else and have a certain bond through that. And so any of the emotional scenes between them were very easy, an easy space for them. Again, very fortunate in that way and how it all played out. But it's powerful to think what that object means, to the real Kent. And funnily enough, that red truck is now in the possession of Christopher Sweeney. We drove it from LA to the location, which is about 1,200 miles. Well, he drove. I sat in the passenger seat, and then he drove it back across the country with his wife. They did a road trip, and he subsequently bought it from me. So this truck is still in his possession, which is hopefully a nice memory for him from the film. It depends on how reliable it is. And so this would typically be sort of the finale, and then there was some play in an earlier script of Kent arriving home and things like that, which never felt true to me, to the film. So I dreamed up this finale scene, and I must say that every time I watch it, it's the one that thrills me the most in the film, because it's mostly because for me, acting wise, this is Dave's greatest scene, because he, in the Wounded Knee, he's just in an emotional reality. He's there. He's 100% there. But here, he acts every moment impeccably, deliciously, like a great comedian, and like a great charmer. But not even just that. He himself is working the dicky table with his leg, and his arms. I mean, he's engineering it all, and every time I screen it, I always sort of walk back into the cinema to make sure I'm there for this moment, so that I can feel the audience's reaction, because it's just perfect. And I'm so grateful that Kent loves this final scene, because you change somebody's material. I mean, he did most of the adaptation, and then I would groom it from there. But there's nothing better than a novelist loving a scene that you've added in, because it so captures the essence of what he had created. Their expressions, and I love Roseanne in that scene, because she looks at him with the love of a doting granddaughter. It's so beautiful. And even just having Fatback there, and the reaction that Fatback has looking at the book as well, it just all lined up perfectly. But thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this. I hope most of you managed to make it to the end of my waffle. And, it's been an incredible long, so far 5.5 year journey of mine on this project, and over 20 years of Kent trying to get it to film. And one of the key things that made the world a difference was, we had the film supported through Kickstarter by fans of the novel, or people that liked my previous work in Indian country. And it meant that I had such a feeling of gratitude and also responsibility making the film. If you got investors, you feel incredibly responsible to them. But when it's a trusting, faithful public taking a shot on you in giving money a year or 2 years before the film is even going to be available, it's incredibly humbling. And some of our executive producers on the films were incredibly generous, and without them, I can't imagine how we'd have gotten the film made. So forever, they are in my heart, and gratitude for that. The other thing is, support Native films. The only way that more Native films can get made is by people going and buying the DVDs, or buying to stream them online, or going to the cinema to see them. There's no point in people sitting around complaining about there's no Native films when you don't support the ones that do exist, because there are some terrific ones out there. So please support films from Indian country, and there's some great Native filmmakers coming through, and keep an eye out for their work. And again, thank you very, very much indeed. Bye-bye.